Well, joining me now to discuss this is the Parliamentary Secretary Josh Frydenberg and the Shadow Parliamentary Secretary Ed Husic. Thank you both very much for your time today. First to you, Ed, it's not what you're doing is what the Prime Minister said, but if we're collecting the internet sites that people are visiting, plus all of the other information, a pretty clear picture can be drawn up by intelligence agencies of what you're up to online.
Well, I think governments, regardless of their political hue, need to be able to keep in step with developments or be able to respond to threats that they perceive will present themselves to the public. So clearly from time to time governments need to undertake reforms, particularly in respect of anti-terrorism and intelligence gathering. But there are also some fairly legitimate questions about how this will all be managed. I still think, for instance, we're going to be pooling all this data and requiring internet service providers to beef up their storage capacity, and there's a question, understandably, of cost, and there's also a question about how the data is used too. I mean, we're going to be pooling all this data. We have arrangements with foreign intelligence agencies about sharing that data, and there are questions that we've seen play out on in the public sphere about how that data is used and whether or not there are sloppy arrangements outside our borders about how data is used as well. And we've seen it, concerns about the way data is used by contractors or others within other countries. And I think the government should be also providing assurances about how data will be used down the track and the sort of ways in which people's privacy can be protected. We're just as uncomfortable about businesses collecting so much data on people, and I think people have a right to ask questions about how government will use data as well.
Josh Frydenberg, what sort of safeguards will the government put in place to allay some of those concerns?
Oh, well, look, we're going to be consulting extensively with the stakeholders in this particular sector, and obviously also consulting with the opposition and debating it through the Parliament. But let's not put our heads in the sand here, David. Australia does face a terrorist threat. We've been on the receiving end of painful terrorist attacks and tragedies, whether it was 9/11, whether it was the Bali bombings in 2002, whether it was the 2009 Marriott hotel bombings in Indonesia. In each case, the perpetrators of those attacks had links back to Afghanistan. Now, we know that around 30 Australians went to fight and participate in the conflict in Afghanistan. 25 of those came back to Australia, and of those 25, 19 participated in further terrorist type activities in Australia, and 8 were convicted. Now, that's a huge number, particularly when you consider that 5 times as many Australians have gone to participate or be involved in what is occurring in Syria and in Iraq than went to participate in Afghanistan. So we do need to take this action. The data retention would be following what has occurred in both the European Union and the United States, and metadata has shown to be very useful to authorities. Indeed, the head of ASIO has said that this would be very critical. Increased power to Julie Bishop to cancel passports based on intelligence advice is also going to be important, together with the massive boost to funding for our various law enforcement intelligence agencies, more than $600 million over 4 years.
But
I think this is a suite of important measures.
But the other thing is too, Josh, this has been a very big, you've referred to overseas jurisdictions. I mean, data retention has been a big issue in the States. I mean, earlier this year, President Obama was forced to clarify the way in which they would collect and retain data as a result of people discovering that, basically the government was accessing a lot of data and there were concerns about how that data was used. So there's absolutely no doubt that governments from time to time need to review and update the way in which they manage threats that present themselves within our border and beyond. But at the same time too, there are legitimate concerns about how you collect so much data, how long you hold on to it, who gets access to it, and ultimately too, who pays for it. The ISPs are very concerned that they don't configure themselves in a way to store the level of data that is being requested here, and I think these are things that do need to be dealt with in the public fora.
And Josh, there are some concerns within the coalition about the data retention from some of the backbenchers that we've spoken to over the last 24 hours.
Absolutely, and we do have to proceed in a very considered and in a measured way, and I'm very confident that Tony Abbott and his ministers will do that. But, you know, imagine the day after, David or Ed, of a terrorist attack here in Australia, and we know that we have prevented such attacks before, whether it's at the Holsworthy military base or the Lucas Heights nuclear reactor. We know that there have been attempts on those sites. Imagine the day after an attack in Australia, explaining to the families or those people who have lost their lives, well, we should have and we could have done more. We have advice from our intelligence agencies. This is not a group of politicians acting unilaterally, David. This is respected people without a political agenda who are experts in their field, who are deeply engaged with their international counterparts, coming to the government and saying, this current threat is greater than the one we've posed in the past, and you do need to act.
Okay, but Josh, let me just...
You're right, and the head of ASIO has said that these changes are crucial for the intelligence communities. Look, I just want to move on from data retention because we've got a few other things that I want to get through. One of them is the reversing of the onus of proof that would make it a criminal offence, essentially, for anyone to travel to Iraq or Syria, for example, unless they can prove that they're going there for legitimate or innocuous reasons. Ed Husick, how will this be viewed in the Muslim community?
I don't know. You'll need to ask various members of the various communities that are around the place in relation to that. I think it relates more to people travelling back to Syria, regardless of their faith, because there are people of all faiths that are affected by the crisis there and also seeping over into Lebanon. And I think you can certainly see, on the one hand, we have clearly a legitimate concern about people who are engaging in mercenary or vigilante action, and the concern about people returning being effectively radicalised and what that might do. So there's a concern there. But there are some people that want to be able to go back to aid family. They're concerned about family and want to be able to go there. So you've got to be able to tread a fine line, obviously, between dealing with a clear threat, also having people step forward and go through a screening process to explain why they're going. But in doing that too, the other issue is reversing the onus of proof has been raised with me. The concern is that this is one of the ways that Peter Grester was tackled over in Egypt if the power is abused. And I'm not saying that that's, our democracy is completely different and operates at a different standard, but there are also, concerns in terms of people's rights that have been raised that need to be dealt with. But it's very tricky when you have this threat exist and you're trying to tackle it and protect people here, and sometimes it's going to involve some tough decisions. But let's see the detail as well before we make a final decision.
Josh Frydenberg, just briefly on that.
Well, Ed's absolutely right. There could be family members, there could be aid workers, there could be journalists who do need to go into these conflict zones for absolutely legitimate purposes. I think the changes that we're proposing here are all about just giving a bit more flexibility to the intelligence services to ensure that they can properly understand the rationale for people moving into those areas, because if they've gone for the wrong reasons, then we will quickly want to investigate them, to interrogate them, and to ensure they don't do any harm once back in Australia.
Okay, I want to look at the Racial Discrimination Act, and the Prime Minister yesterday, while announcing these terror law changes, also revealed that the government was throwing on the scrap heap its plans to change Section 18C of that Act. This is, Josh Frydenberg, a broken election promise, but one that would be welcomed in many communities, particularly ethnic communities.
Well, when we first mooted these changes to 18C, David, it was because we did not believe that the litmus test, the standard for an offence under the Racial Discrimination Act, should be a hurt feelings test, to offend and insult. And, protecting freedom of speech is supported right across the political spectrum. But since the Attorney-General put out the proposed amendments, there has been, as you say, a deep amount of community concern, 5,000 plus submissions, some counter views within our own political party, and at a time when we need to promote community harmony, the Prime Minister said he has taken that decision to to ensure that we don't proceed with those changes at the moment, and you know, he will be supported by his party for that.
And will he get your support for dumping these changes?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the Prime Minister is right. We need to promote community harmony, and there was opposition to these changes. But also at the same time, we've always got to understand that freedom of speech is paramount. And as I've said before, I thought the way Andrew Bolt was treated in that case was wrong. And I don't think if we were to draft that legislation again today, we would do it in the same way.
Ed Husick, Labor is crowing about the fact that the government has backflipped on this. But is this a sign that the Prime Minister is listening to the community, is prepared to change course on advice?
The series of backflips that we've seen from this government over the last week, this isn't about the good in their hearts, it's about the fear in their eyes. I mean, they know that they have upset so many people about the way that they've conducted policy since coming to office and the type of things that they've wanted to inflict on people, be it through the budget or be it through Racial Discrimination Act or be it through the insanity of their paid parental leave scheme. And now what they're trying to do is, not because they believe in the virtue of it, they're doing it to save themselves. They're not doing it in community interest, they're doing it in their political interest. And we're now supposed to give them credit because of what they're doing, what we're supposed to give them a cookie. I mean, this is just ridiculous that they should be congratulated on this, when really, if left to their own devices, they would have undertaken a series of things that would have caused hurt and division in the community. I mean, Josh, you asked Josh if he welcomed it. Well, Josh was defending the changes before the backflip was announced, and now, of course, he's defending the backflip. But we needed people, particularly from the Liberal camp, to stand up and say that this was the wrong thing. And if Andrew Bolt, according to you, Josh, was treated in a bad way, well, then Andrew should have taken up an appeal, which I understand he didn't do along the way, and he'll probably chip me for making this observation, but so be it. And that's happened too. And just another thing, just a sideline just briefly on this. What I noticed in the whole package of things yesterday is our little bit of National Red Tape Unrepeal Day, where the National Security Legislation Monitor that was cut on Repeal Day was saved by Unrepeal Day in all these measures and backflips that were announced yesterday. So, good move there.
Josh, a quick chance to respond. We've just got 30 seconds or so left.
Look, we are being a responsible government. We're listening, and we're not going to make any apologies for taking the necessary measures to protect the community. And at the same time, we want to ensure community harmony. So the Prime Minister made the comments about the change of policy on 18C at the same time of announcing a suite of measures, because ultimately our goal is both to protect the community and to ensure that it's also harmonious and united at a difficult time.
Josh Frydenberg and Ed Husick, great to see you both harmonious as always. Thank you for your company on AM Agenda.
Quick shout out too, a little light went out on Twitter yesterday. The Rudd 2000 account by Scotty Bridges and Stephen, I think it was Stephen Owen, was shut down yesterday. Great laughs. Thanks for all the fun, guys.
Thanks for the memories.
Yes, indeed.
Thanks Ed. Thanks Josh.
Thanks
After
Ed.
the break,
Thanks,
Peter Dutton,
David.
the Health Minister. Stay with us.